Hey guys, tonight we descend into the glittering pit of influence, the kind that hides a blade behind a warm grin. You're not here to be liked. You're here to understand why being liked is often the bait, not the goal. You sit now in the grand throne room of Renaissance Florence, surrounded not by velvet and harps, but by whispers, knives, and masks. And at the center of it all, Niccolo Machiavelli, historian, diplomat, manipulator. He doesn't flinch when telling you how the world really works. He hands you a dagger wrapped in silk and says, "Smile while you use it." You probably won't survive this if you insist on being a good person first and an effective one second. Power doesn't wait for ethics to catch up, it just moves, and those who hesitate into ruin. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from tonight, and what's the local time there? I love seeing how far this strange little bedtime cult has spread. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking through a marble corridor, shadows stretching like velvet ropes around the corners. You hear the quiet click of leather boots behind you. That's power. It doesn't yell, it follows, and if you're not careful, it passes you. You enter a chamber lined with oil portraits and political ghosts. This is where influence begins, not with volume, not with truth, but with charm. Machiavelli's first rule, appear soft while thinking sharp. To influence someone, you must first disarm them emotionally. You must smile, nod, share just enough vulnerability to seem relatable, but never so much that they see the strings behind your puppetry. Charm is a mask with a hinge. Behind it, something sharp waits. You meet a man named Cesare Borgia, Machiavelli's poster child for controlled ruthlessness. Handsome, polished, confident. He didn't shout his ambition, he oozed it. When he met rivals, he laughed easily, praised them publicly, and then, without hesitation, had them strangled in a villa 2 days later. Was he evil, or just realistic? You'll find most people want to be seduced, not convinced. Influence doesn't come from overpowering someone, it comes from making them believe it was their idea all along. Here's a quirky tidbit. In medieval Italy, it was considered bad form to smile too often in court, unless you were very powerful. Why? Because only those untouchable by consequences could afford to look that friendly. Smiling was seen as both a disarming gesture and a quiet threat. I am so secure in my position that I can pretend to be your friend. Modern psychology echoes this. The liking principle in persuasion research, made famous by Robert Cialdini, shows that people are more likely to comply with requests from those they like. But Machiavelli knew this 500 years before Stanford ran a lab. So how do you use this? Let's say you're dealing with someone who's guarded, boss, rival, mother-in-law, whoever. You don't confront, you don't demand, you align. You reflect, you study how they move, how they talk, and then you subtly begin to mirror it. Not enough to seem fake, just enough to feel familiar. Psychologists call this limbic synchrony, matching someone's body language and tone to build subconscious trust. Machiavelli would call it camouflage. Here's the trick though. While you're busy charming, you're also assessing. You're watching where they twitch when they're nervous, what topics make them blink faster, how they handle silence. Because influence isn't about what you say, it's about what you notice. Remember, people reveal everything when they think you're not listening. You offer a joke about something personal, light, humorous, seemingly unimportant. They laugh. But did they look down first? Did their shoulders tense? You touch their elbow as you laugh. Do they lean in or pull away? Tiny cues. Inconsequential in isolation, a goldmine in pattern. You're not smiling just because it's polite. You're smiling to lower their sword. You're giving them warmth not to build a friendship, but to convince them there's no war coming. Even though there is, let's return to Borgia. Machiavelli watched him eliminate rivals one by one, never with rage, always with elegance. Once he invited a particularly vocal opponent to a lavish dinner. Wine flowed, laughter echoed. As the man walked home still buzzing from the meal, he was met in the street by masked assassins. His throat was slit before his smile even faded. Scholars still argue whether Machiavelli truly admired Borgia or merely used him as a literary warning. Some say he envied the man's clarity. Others believe he feared what he'd become by the end of his political career. But one thing is certain, Borgia proved that a soft tone and a soft hand can carry the sharpest blade. This is where influence begins, not in plans or speeches, but in first impressions. The subtle way you walk into a room, the calm tone in your voice when others expect fire, the faint smile when someone tests your boundaries. These are weapons. Machiavelli never believed in brute force as a first move. Why wrestle when you can whisper? A quick exercise for you. Think of the last time someone said yes to you. Now ask yourself, did they agree because of logic, or did they agree because they didn't feel threatened? Influence is about lowering shields, and a smile is the oldest key to the oldest lock, but never confuse charm for friendship. And never forget this, your smile is not just for them, it's a warning to yourself that you're about to do something ruthless, but softly, because the dagger works best when the grip is hidden under velvet. You're standing in front of a mirror now, not just any mirror, but one polished with centuries of politics, manipulation, and whispered regrets. What you see isn't yourself, not yet. It's the version of you that other people see, the illusion you've sculpted, the myth you let them believe. Because in Machiavelli's world, perception is power. And the first lesson he drills into your veins, control the mirror or be shattered by it. You walk into a room, and within seconds, people begin building their story of you. They notice the clothes, the posture, the calm or chaos of your voice. They measure your confidence, your status, your value, not through truth, but through signals, through image, through appearance. So Machiavelli asks, why not use that? Why not become the curator of your own legend? You aren't lying, you're storytelling. In The Prince, he makes it clear, what you appear to be matters more than what you are. Virtue is fine, sure, but if you seem virtuous, people will believe it, and that belief is enough. They'll follow you, trust you, protect you, and never notice the dark tide just beneath your grin. It's why modern politics thrives on optics. It's why billionaires wear hoodies and CEOs post family pics during layoffs. Appearances are not deception, they're strategy. Here's a historical gem. King Louis XIV of France, dressed in golden robes, staged elaborate sunrise rituals, and called himself the Sun King. Did he glow with divine wisdom? Not really, but people saw him as the center of their universe. That's power built on a perfectly painted illusion. Your own version? Maybe less gold and trumpets. But when you walk into a meeting with a perfectly timed pause before speaking, when your outfit says, "I'm deliberate," when your silence forces others to lean in, that's your illusion working. But here's where it gets Machiavellian. You don't just build a good image, you build the right image for the audience. That's the nuance. A ruthless warlord and a peacetime ruler require different masks. So do a romantic partner and a business investor. Influence comes from recognizing the scene and dressing the part. Psychologists call this adaptive self-presentation. You call it not being stupid. You're not being fake, you're being effective. Let's say you're leading a team. If you're too casual, they question your strength. If you're too cold, they resent your authority. So what do? You show warmth, but only enough to foster loyalty. You reveal humility, but only in calculated doses. You stay consistent in your image, even if you're falling apart behind the curtain. And here's a fun quirk. Studies show that people often prefer confident lies over insecure truths. In one behavioral study, confident job applicants, even when faking experience, were consistently rated higher than honest but timid ones. Machiavelli would smirk at that and say, "Told you so." It's not about faking it, it's about timing it. A fringe historical example: in ancient Rome, generals returning from war held public triumphs, massive parades where they offered sacrifices to the gods dressed in white and spoke humble prayers. Behind them marched columns of chained prisoners and stolen gold. The message was clear: I conquer, but I do it righteously. It's emotional theater, and it works. Let's try it in everyday life. You want to make a bold ask at work? Begin with a generous offer. Help someone. Give credit publicly. Now, when you propose a controversial change, you've earned the benefit of the doubt. You've bathed your image in light. The shadow of your ambition disappears. Want a sneakier version? Say nothing, but let others speak for your goodness. Volunteer visibly once. Defend someone gently. Mention a selfless act, but never brag. People will do the myth building for you. And once you're the good one, you can move more freely than anyone else. But beware, this isn't a license for cruelty. Machiavelli doesn't endorse chaos, he endorses balance. So you must always ask, will this illusion serve the long game? Because once virtue becomes your mask, it also becomes your vulnerability. If people discover it's just for show, they don't see ambition, they see betrayal. Scholars still wrestle with this contradiction. Did Machiavelli believe in any moral truth, or was he a moral relativist, loyal only to effectiveness? Some argue he was a patriot, willing to compromise ethics to unify Italy. Others say he was bitter, writing from exile, burnt by the lies of noblemen who preached virtue and practiced vice. Either way, he left us with this warning: men judge more by the eye than the hand. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. So tonight, ask yourself, where have I clung to virtue, even when it made me weak? Where could I use the appearance of goodness to earn a little more freedom, trust, or power? And if I were truly strategic, what moral performance would I give tomorrow, knowing the script might get me everything I need? Because in a world where perception guides loyalty, sometimes the halo is heavier than the crown. You're standing now at the edge of a strange fork in the road. On one side, the warm trail of love, acceptance, and connection. On the other, a narrow, shadowed path paved with goosebumps and cold calculations. Machiavelli doesn't blink as he points toward the shadowed one. He simply asks, do you want to be loved, or do you want to be obeyed? And then he grins. Because in The Prince, he answers his own question with brutal honesty. If you must choose, choose fear. Now let's not confuse this with sadism. You're not becoming a cartoon villain stroking a cat and threatening minions. What Machiavelli meant was far colder and far smarter. To influence someone long-term, you need predictable control. Love is fickle. Love can fade. Love is emotional, and emotion is unstable. But fear lingers. It etches itself into the spine and whispers warnings in moments of doubt. Tonight, you step into that uncomfortable truth. Picture this: you're a ruler, or a CEO, or just a parent trying to get a 6-year-old to brush their teeth without triggering a UN-level negotiation. You want compliance, you want respect, you want peace. But if you rely only on love, you're gambling with chaos. The moment your kindness doesn't serve their interests, loyalty dissolves. Machiavelli saw this up close in Florence, where love-born alliances collapsed the moment someone offered a better deal. But fear, that stuck. Even when love ran out, fear kept the doors locked and the voices quiet. The fear Machiavelli speaks of is not terror, it's respect born from consequence. You don't need people to flinch when you enter a room. You need them to pause, to ask, what happens if I cross this line? Because true influence is not about being liked, it's about being remembered when you're not in the room. Let's drag this into modern life. Say you're managing a team. You want them to enjoy working with you. But the moment you become too agreeable, always accommodating, always soft, you've trained them to test boundaries. Missed deadlines, unspoken rules, friendly disrespect, not out of malice, out of comfort. Influence shrinks when boundaries blur. Machiavelli would say, establish consequence early, then enforce it once, quietly but absolutely. Quirky historical echo of this comes from Vlad the Impaler. Yes, that Vlad. One day, a group of foreign envoys refused to remove their hats in his presence, citing religious custom. Vlad nodded, smiled, and nailed the hats to their heads. Now, was that Machiavellian? Arguably too far, but you know what happened next? No one ever forgot the importance of protocol in his court again. Fear leaves residue. But let's slow down. You're not impaling anyone. You're managing a social circle, a business, a classroom, a family. And Machiavelli gives you a softer toolkit. Delay forgiveness. Enforce boundaries on the first violation. Don't explain consequences. Deliver them. Speak softly, but make sure they know where the line is. Here's where psychology backs him up. Studies in behavioral compliance show that people respond better to leaders who combine warmth with firmness. It's called authoritative leadership, not authoritarian. You offer structure, clarity, and fairness, but you don't negotiate every rule. You don't flinch when someone tests your authority. Want a fringe tidbit? In chimpanzee communities, the alpha doesn't maintain status by brute violence. He maintains it by controlling reactions to infractions. He rarely punishes, but when he does, it's fast, surgical, and public. And then, back to grooming and laughter. No grudge, just structure. Machiavelli would smile at the chimps and say, they understand politics better than kings. Now here's the art. Fear without cruelty, authority without tyranny. Distance without coldness. You're building what Machiavelli calls a reputation for firmness, not meanness, firmness. You want people to say behind your back, they're fair, but don't mess with them. That's fear doing its job. But don't confuse momentary fear with lasting power. You must temper it. Let's look at a delicate example. You're dating someone. In the beginning, you're charming, generous, fun, they adore you. But at some point, they cross a boundary, maybe subtle, maybe serious. Instead of overreacting or retreating, you pause. You say very little. Your tone drops. You communicate not with drama, but with finality. And you make it clear that version of you only shows up once. But when it does, it sticks. They may still love you, but now they love you with gravity. Machiavelli says it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But let's whisper something even smarter. The most effective influence is when people love you and quietly fear disappointing you. You'll know you've succeeded when people check themselves before lying to you, when they pause before pushing your limits, when they wonder what would happen, not because you ever exploded, but because you never had to. And when someone asks them, why do you respect this person so much? They won't say because they're nice. They'll say, because I know not to cross them. Scholars still debate whether Machiavelli was describing human nature or prescribing it. Was he coldly observing power or shaping it with bloody fingers? Some claim he was warning against corruption. Others think he relished the dance of power and fear. But whether he was prophet or puppeteer, the strategy works. So before you close this chapter tonight, ask yourself, are you admired or tolerated? Are you respected or convenient? And if you're still waiting for others to see your value without consequence, you might be standing on the wrong side of influence. Power isn't about being feared. It's about being remembered as the one who cannot be dismissed. You find yourself walking through a foggy garden at dawn, where every tree is bent just slightly wrong, and the statues don't seem to be looking where they should. It feels like a dream, but you know better. This is deception, Machiavelli's favorite playground. Here, truth isn't outlawed, it's just optional. Tonight, you step into the most controversial and arguably most effective of Machiavellian strategies, manipulating through illusion. Or as he might put it, smoke when they expect mirrors, silence when they expect answers. You've probably been taught your whole life that honesty builds trust, but Machiavelli shakes his head slowly and replies, trust builds power, and sometimes power requires lying. You don't lie carelessly, You lie strategically, not to deceive everyone, but to let your silence and omissions tell a story more useful than the truth. In The Prince, Machiavelli describes a ruler as needing to be both a lion and a fox. The lion for strength, yes, but the fox for cunning, because the fox knows where the traps are and, more importantly, how to set them. You are now the fox. Welcome to the labyrinth. Let's start with a quirky but true tidbit. In ancient China, military generals used ghost armies, massive wooden replicas of troops, painted and arranged at night to appear real from a distance. The goal wasn't to fight, it was to influence perception, to win before the enemy attacked. Now drag that into your everyday life. Ever left an unread message on read to signal emotional distance? Ever posted something slightly mysterious just to stir curiosity or guilt? Ever answered a question with a question because the truth wasn't useful? Congratulations! You've already dabbled in Machiavellian deception, but now you'll learn to refine it. The first rule: don't lie unnecessarily. That's noise, and noise gets noticed. Instead, let others assume what's useful to you. Give them partial information. Let silence fill in the rest, and never correct an assumption that benefits you. Say someone thinks you're in demand, booked, busy, important. Are you? Maybe, maybe not. But unless that false perception hurts you, Machiavelli would say, let them believe, let them sweat, let them adjust their tone before you say a word. In relationships, this shows up as emotional ambiguity. You're warm, then cool, present, then absent. You say just enough to keep them guessing. Not because you enjoy games, but because certainty kills urgency. People don't chase what they already own. They chase what's slipping away. A powerful example comes from Cesare Borgia. Yes, him again, one of Machiavelli's obsessions. At one point, Cesare needed to clean up a rebellious city. Instead of marching in with brutality, he hired a cruel governor named Ramiro de Orco to do the dirty work. And once the blood had dried, Cesare publicly executed him in the city square, claiming he was too harsh. The people cheered. Borgia looked merciful. Scholars still argue, was it calculated from the start? Was Ramiro just a pawn? Machiavelli never answers, he just smiles. Deception works best when even the liar seems surprised. So how do you use this in your world? Let's say you're negotiating. You want more money, more leverage. You don't reveal everything. Instead, you ask vague questions. You nod without commitment. You mention another opportunity but don't name it. You pause before answering. You create informational imbalance. Psychologists call this the illusion of transparency, the false belief that others know what you're thinking. When used well, this bias makes people fill in your blanks with their fears or hopes. In other words, they write your script for you. And here's a fringe tactic Machiavelli would admire: the strategic confession. You reveal a small vulnerability, a mistake, a shortcoming, on purpose. It makes you appear honest, open, it lowers defenses, but you do it only to mask something bigger. Oh, I'm terrible with names, you say at a networking event. People laugh, relate, disarm. They never notice that you've dodged 5 personal questions while they spilled everything. This is the fox's dance. Give them 1 card and take their entire hand. But be warned, deception without empathy becomes cruelty. You're not here to destroy people, you're here to steer them. Even Machiavelli stressed this. His manipulations weren't rooted in sadism. They were pragmatic tools for survival in a world where idealism got you killed. So when you deceive, ask, is this necessary? Is this protective? Is this in service of something greater than control? And always remember, the best lies are built on truth, not because the truth is sacred, but because it's stable. A fabricated persona collapses under scrutiny, but a sharpened truth, angled, reframed, slightly warped, can hold its shape forever. Want to try something real? Think of someone you influence: friend, partner, client, follower. Now imagine telling them 90% of the truth. But omitting the last 10 cent, the motive, the cost, the doubt, would the outcome change? Machiavelli says that 10% is the price of control. Still, this strategy has a cost. Lies isolate you. Deception builds walls. But Machiavelli would argue, better walls than wounds. Because in his world, trusting too easily meant dying too soon. So tonight, as the fan hums softly beside you and the shadows grow long across your ceiling, ask yourself, where am I pretending to be transparent when I'm really guiding someone blindfolded? And more importantly, what illusions are being used on me, right now, this week, this year? Because here's the final trick of deception. The better you are at using it, the more likely you are to fall for it. Even the fox sometimes forgets which mirror hides the trapdoor. You wake up somewhere strange, not because the place is unfamiliar, but because suddenly you are. You've said the right things, worn the right mask, smiled the right way, and now, people think they know you. They're convinced of it, but they don't. They only know the version of you you've allowed. And tonight, you'll learn to weaponize that gap, the space between who you are and what they see. Because as Machiavelli whispers in the margins of The Prince, everyone watches what you appear to be. Few understand what you truly are. Which brings us to one of the most effective psychological levers of all time, mystery. In modern terms, it's called strategic opacity. In Machiavellian terms, keep them guessing, because when they can't predict you, they can't control you. Let's start with a little test. Who scares you more, the person who yells in anger, or the one who goes silent and smiles? Exactly. Unpredictability triggers cognitive panic. Your brain, wired for pattern recognition, starts to short circuit. Why? Because what it can't predict, it can't relax around. Machiavelli knew this instinctively. If people can map your moves, they'll exploit them. But if they never know whether you'll forgive, retaliate, disappear, or reward, they start to self-regulate in your favor. That's influence without lifting a finger. Think about it. The teacher who occasionally snaps in unpredictable ways? The teacher who occasionally snaps in unpredictable ways? The boss who might cancel a meeting or make a public example of someone? The partner who never quite explains how they feel? Each of them holds subtle power. Not because they're cruel, but because their emotional weather forecast never loads. One fringe example of this shows up in dating. A 2010 Harvard study showed that people rated potential partners more attractive when they were uncertain about how much the other liked them. Mystery activated obsession. Clarity killed it. Machiavelli would have turned that study into a kingdom. So how do you use this in your life? Let's say you're in a professional setting. Instead of constantly updating others on what you're doing, you let results speak. You don't announce every intention. You don't attend every debate. But when you do speak, people lean in. That doesn't mean you're playing games. It means you're preserving agency. Because predictability, while comforting, also becomes cheap. And Machiavelli would argue that accessibility is the first casualty of influence. Let's take another historical example, Napoleon Bonaparte. He'd often write letters to his generals, instructing them to change their plans the moment the enemy thought they'd figured them out. This constant recalibration drove his rivals mad and kept them reactive. He never moved in straight lines. Even his mood was part of the strategy. One aide described Napoleon as capable of affection, cruelty, patience, rage, sometimes all before breakfast. That's not instability, that's design. Scholars still argue whether Machiavelli's admiration for mystery was about psychological safety or strategic chaos. Some say unpredictability mirrors nature's harsh logic. Others claim it's a mask for fear-based leadership. But all agree, when you control the pattern, you control the pace. So what does this look like practically? Start by withholding clarity, not to confuse, but to anchor power. Instead of saying, "Here's exactly what I'm doing," you say, "I've got a few things in the works. Let's see what unfolds." Instead of yes or no, you say, "That depends." You frame your decisions in possibility, not certainty. Because certainty is static, mystery is alive. Mystery even works in clothing. Ever notice how some people wear the same exact thing every day? Black turtleneck, crisp suit, monochrome hoodie? That's not just laziness, that's pattern projection. It says focus on what I don't reveal, because what I do reveal is tightly controlled. Even body language plays into this. You don't blink fast, you don't explain your smile, you nod slowly, not quickly. These are pacing cues, and they let others stew in the ambiguity of your presence. Because if they're decoding you, they're not challenging you. Want to try it? At your next gathering, social, professional, even romantic, answer one question tonight less directly than usual. Add 1 second more of pause, withhold one extra detail, then watch what happens. They'll lean forward, they'll analyze, they'll recalibrate. And that's when you know you've made your presence psychologically expensive. Of course, mystery must be balanced. Too much opacity and people will disengage, too little and you become wallpaper. So Machiavelli's formula becomes, reveal just enough to remain relevant, conceal just enough to remain in control. And here's the hidden benefit. Mystery doesn't just protect your power, it protects your peace. Because when no one knows your every thought, no one owns your every move. Oh, tonight, as the room grows quieter and the last of the day's thoughts begin to fade, ask yourself, what would happen if I became 20% harder to read? What power might that open up? And what peace might that protect? Because in a world addicted to full disclosure, the person who knows how to vanish, even just a little, wins. You arrive at a dark corridor now, one that doesn't bend, doesn't twist. It only moves forward, straight, final, cold. This is where Machiavelli leaves behind the silk and smiles and picks up the blade. Because if there's one rule that slices through every page of The Prince, it's this. If you must harm someone, harm them so thoroughly they can never return the favor. You pause at the edge of that sentence. It sounds brutal, savage even, and it is. But Machiavelli doesn't deal in politeness, he deals in reality. And in reality, half measures invite revenge. Tonight, you learn why. And why, when it comes to enemies, mercy is often the most dangerous choice. Let's begin with the infamous case of Agathocles of Syracuse, a tyrant who rose from humble origins to become king through calculated, bloody steps. At one point, Agathocles invited the entire Senate and wealthiest citizens of his city to a feast. Midway through, he gave the signal and had them all slaughtered in a single, pre-planned purge. Every threat to his power, eliminated in one night. Was it horrific? Absolutely. Did anyone ever challenge his rule again? Not once. Machiavelli didn't just mention this in passing, he highlighted it as an example of cruelty well used, that is, violence executed with precision, done all at once, and never repeated. A purge followed by peace. Because here's the paradox. Violence, when surgical, can produce long-term stability, but kindness, when extended to dangerous people, creates long-term chaos. Now breathe. You're not planning a coup, you're not assassinating senators, but you are trying to protect your energy, your boundaries, your future. And there are people, rivals, narcissists, manipulators who will take every ounce of your kindness and forge it into a weapon. Machiavelli's point is this. When someone proves they are a threat, remove them completely, not halfway, not emotionally, not with lingering loopholes. You either end their ability to harm you, or you sign up for a lifetime subscription to regret. Let's bring it into modern life. You're in a toxic friendship. Every time you pull away, they apologize, promise, cry, you go soft, you let them stay. And 3 weeks later, same poison, same games, you've wounded the enemy, but they're still breathing, and now they hate you more, because your slap didn't kill them, it insulted them. In Machiavelli's world, that's the worst of both outcomes. You made an enemy, and you left them room to retaliate. In psychology, this plays out as what therapists call the trauma repair loop, a dynamic where one party continuously harms another, then seeks forgiveness, only to repeat the cycle. Machiavelli doesn't believe in loops, he believes in finality. Quirky historical echo of this comes from the Ottoman Empire. Upon taking the throne, new sultans would often execute their brothers immediately. Why? Because any surviving sibling could later lead a rebellion. Horrifying, yes, but Machiavelli would say they ensured stability through cruelty and saved their kingdoms from years of civil war. Even scholars still wrestle with this idea. Some argue Machiavelli was simply describing the brutal logic of survival. Others say he endorsed it, coldly, unapologetically, but none dispute the outcome. A dead enemy never sues for revenge. So how do you translate this into a non-bloody 21st century strategy? Let's say someone has betrayed your trust. Subtly, repeatedly. You don't lecture, you don't punish with hope, you cut ties entirely. Without fanfare, no dramatic goodbye, no final confrontation, just silence, distance. Absence, the quiet kind of finality that doesn't ask for closure because it is the closure. And the beauty of this, you don't give them the gift of performance. You don't offer a stage for apology, manipulation, or emotional theater. You just disappear, and that to a manipulator is the deepest wound of all. But this goes beyond relationships. In business, fire the toxic employee quickly. In negotiations, identify the player who lies twice and never work with them again. In leadership, remove threats early, decisively, and with clarity, not rage. Machiavelli never once suggested cruelty for cruelty's sake. His warning was about precision. Injury should be done all at once so that tasting it less, it will give less offense. In other words, hurt them once, so you never have to do it again. That's the hard part. Because we're wired for diplomacy, second chances, empathy, and those traits are beautiful until they leave us bleeding again. So tonight, as your eyelids grow heavy and the fan hums a little more slowly, ask yourself, where am I applying mercy where I should be applying finality? Who have I wounded but not removed? And what would it look like to finally close the door, lock it, and throw away the key, not out of hatred, but out of self-respect? Because in the end, Machiavelli isn't asking you to become cruel. He's asking you to stop being careless with your peace. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to never give them another chance. You're sitting in a candlelit chamber now, the flame flickering just enough to cast shadows that seem alive. They dance like spectators to your performance. But tonight, you're not the audience, you're the puppeteer, and Machiavelli hands you the strings. Because influence, at its core, isn't about brute control. It's about the illusion of autonomy. People don't like being told what to do. They love thinking it was their idea. And that's where you begin tonight. The puppet master's smile. You don't command, you suggest, you don't shout, you nudge, you don't dominate. You frame the decision and let them walk into it with pride. Because if there's one truth Machiavelli bet his soul on, it's this. People will fight to the death for choices they believe they made freely, even if you engineered every step. Let's start with a curious quirk from behavioral science, the IKEA effect. Yes, the furniture. Studies show that people place significantly more value on things they help build, even if poorly, because effort gives the illusion of ownership. That's not just psychology, that's Machiavellian fuel. You want someone to commit to your plan? Don't present it fully formed. Involve them just enough to trigger their ego. Ask a harmless question. Frame a suggestion as a reaction to their own needs. I've been thinking about your idea, you say, even if it was never theirs. Boom, instant buy-in. They feel seen, heard, powerful, and they never realize that you've simply rerouted their attention. Let's pull this into a classic historical example. In Renaissance courts, political marriages were never framed as commands. They were packaged as mutually beneficial alliances. But behind the velvet curtains, Machiavellian figures like Catherine de' Medici carefully orchestrated the players, who to love, who to bed, who to betray. Make people feel like kings while quietly moving the throne behind them. The same pattern thrives today in marketing, leadership, parenting, even romance. The ad doesn't tell you what to buy. It asks you what kind of person you want to be. The politician doesn't demand votes. They mirror your fears and say, "I hear you." All roads point back to one trick. Frame the action in terms of their identity, not your agenda. Let's say you're leading a team and you need everyone to adopt a new system. Machiavellian way. I've seen how adaptable you've been in the past. Your input could shape how we roll this out. Now it's their strength, their contribution, their decision, and it works because of something called reactance theory. Humans instinctively push back when freedom feels threatened, but when you let someone feel free, they'll often choose exactly what you wanted all along. Of course, there's danger here. Too much manipulation and people feel used. So the art is subtlety. Give them wins, small ones, symbolic ones. Machiavelli advised rulers to delegate cruelty, but claim generosity. In modern terms, let someone else deliver the bad news. Let them choose between two outcomes you've already pre-selected. Let them feel powerful, so they don't notice how powerless they actually are. Here's a fringe example from the animal world. Dolphins in captivity have been trained not with force, but with carefully timed rewards and illusion of choice. Touch the ball, get a fish, spin left, get praise, but eventually the dolphin performs the full show with no command at all, because it believes it's choosing freely. You're not a trainer, but you are trying to influence minds. And sometimes a carefully placed, "of course it's up to you," is more powerful than a paragraph of logic. Let's go even deeper. Think of a past disagreement, a real one. Now imagine if instead of pushing your view, you simply mirrored theirs for a moment. Not agreement, just reflection. Then gently reframe the conflict in their own language. "I totally get that you want X. That's why I'm suggesting Y. It protects that." Boom, bridge built. They don't feel pushed, they feel understood. And once someone feels understood, they stop fighting. They start deciding, and you just happen to be holding the menu. Scholars still wrestle with whether Machiavelli was heartless or just painfully honest. Was he exploiting human nature or simply using it as it is? He never encouraged constant deceit. He simply urged that when stakes are high, influence is not a game of fairness, it's a game of framing. So tonight, before you drift off completely, ask yourself, where have I been trying too hard to convince, when I could simply redirect? Who in my life needs to feel like they've won, even if I'm the one writing the script? And where could I pull one string to make 5 move without resistance? Because power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just smiles. And lets you think the idea was yours all along. You're standing on a balcony now, high above a courtyard of whispered alliances. Below you, friends become rivals, rivals shake hands, and laughter echoes like a lie. You know better than to trust what you hear. Because tonight, Machiavelli teaches you something even colder than betrayal. Unity is a threat. Division is a tool. And if you truly want to influence people, you must master the subtle art of stirring chaos while keeping your hands clean. Welcome to the kingdom of divide and rule, where you don't burn bridges, you just quietly loosen the bolts holding them together. Let's get something out of the way. This isn't about backstabbing or drama, it's about control. Machiavelli believed that when people are too united, they grow strong. They organize, they question leadership, they form coalitions. But when they're fragmented, confused, or subtly opposed to each other, they look upward, for guidance, for approval, for protection. That's your throne. Let's go back to Renaissance Italy, where this strategy was practically an Olympic sport. Every noble family wanted power. But instead of crushing opponents head-on, they'd quietly turn them against each other by spreading rumors, withholding favors, or making strategic alliances with their enemies. One family gains a seat on the council. Suddenly another hears whispers that they were insulted. And so begins the spiral: rivalries, blame, tension. Meanwhile, the Machiavellian figure sits at the center, untouched, necessary, above the fray. Sounds dark, maybe. But you've seen this play out in your own life, haven't you? The manager who subtly praises one team member in front of another, just enough to spark quiet competition. The friend who relays what someone else said about you, not maliciously, but just so you're aware. The politician who floats conflicting promises to different groups, then steps back as they argue. Divide, distract, dominate. And here's the wild thing: you don't even need to lie. All you need to do is frame, emphasize, highlight subtle differences in goals, values, personalities. Let's bring in some psychology. Social identity theory tells us that people crave in-group belonging. But once groups are formed, even arbitrarily, competition emerges almost immediately. Minimal group paradigm experiments prove this. Assign people randomly to Team A or Team B, and within minutes they start favoring their own and distrusting the other, even if the groups are meaningless. Machiavelli never saw those experiments, but he lived them. He knew, if you want to be the one everyone returns to, don't make them love each other too much. Here's a quirky example from nature. In a beehive, when two potential queens emerge, worker bees often allow them to fight to the death. Why? Because only one leader can rule in peace, and as long as two factions exist, the hive is unstable. So the bees let chaos sort it out. Machiavelli would say, you don't need to win the fight, just make sure it happens, and be ready when the dust clears. So how do you use this? Let's say you're in a work setting. There are two strong personalities on your team, both loyal but competitive. You don't crush their rivalry, you guide it, you offer praise in slightly different languages. To one, your ideas are bold, to the other, your structure is flawless. Now they each believe they hold a unique value, and they begin competing to prove it. Do they hate each other? No, but they're not aligned, and that keeps them from aligning against you. Of course, this isn't permission to be toxic. The real trick is balance. You divide just enough to prevent rebellion, not to destroy cohesion. You allow difference, not chaos. Because chaos is loud and Machiavellian influence, it's quiet. Let's explore the softer version of this. Say you're managing a creative project, multiple collaborators, different visions. You don't enforce absolute unity. That breeds compromise, dullness. Instead, you allow controlled tension. You privately affirm the value of differing views. You let the debate run, while you position yourself as the arbiter of clarity. And when the friction grows uncomfortable, you resolve it publicly with grace. Now you're not just the puppet master, you're the peacekeeper, and everyone owes you something. Scholars still debate whether Machiavelli's obsession with division was about maintaining power or avoiding betrayal. Some say it was born from watching too many trusting rulers fall. Others say it was projection. Machiavelli himself was betrayed, imprisoned, exiled. He knew what unity could do, and he never trusted it again. But either way, the lesson stands. If you're not managing the dynamics between others, they'll manage you. So tonight, as the hum of the world fades and the stillness begins to settle in your chest, ask yourself, where have I been trying too hard to unite what may need to stay separate? Where could a little tension keep me centered, respected, unquestioned? And where might I be the only one who benefits when everyone else is just slightly unsure of each other? Because influence doesn't always come from being the strongest. Sometimes it comes from being the only one who isn't distracted. You enter a room dressed in gold, not because you're rich, but because gold means something to the people watching. It's not wealth, it's virtue, goodness, honor, a shimmering lie. And tonight, Machiavelli invites you to drape yourself in that illusion, not to deceive for sport, but to influence for survival. Because while others carry their morals like shields, Machiavelli carries his like tools. He doesn't ask whether something is right, he asks whether it works. And the next strategy in your arsenal? Use virtue as a weapon, not a rule book. Now this one hurts a little, because you were raised probably to believe that being good was its own reward, that doing the right thing guaranteed a better world. Machiavelli rolls his eyes softly. Be good, he says, when it's useful. Be seen as good, always. Here's what he means. People trust the appearance of virtue more than virtue itself. They don't follow saints, they follow symbols. And if you know how to perform morality at the right time, you can earn loyalty, admiration, and protection, even if your methods underneath are cold as stone. Let's look at a prime example. Ferdinand of Aragon. Machiavelli admired him, not for being gentle, but for being publicly devout. Ferdinand conquered, killed, and schemed, but he never missed a religious ceremony. He cloaked himself in God, even as he expanded his empire through brutal campaigns. The people never saw a contradiction. They saw a man of principle, because he looked like one. This isn't about hypocrisy, it's about leverage. Modern psychology calls this moral licensing. When someone does something good, they often feel licensed to do something bad later. But Machiavelli flips it. Do something good-looking so you can quietly do something useful. No guilt required. This shows up in politics every election cycle. A leader kisses babies, cries during speeches, donates to charities, while negotiating backroom deals that would make a devil blush. And the people? They remember the tears, not the terms. But you're not a politician, you're a person, and this tactic can still be yours. Let's say you're navigating a tense conflict. You step in, not to pick sides, but to calm the storm. You frame your presence as peacekeeper. You offer thoughtful insights, forgiveness, perhaps a small sacrifice. Everyone applauds your maturity. What they don't notice? You've just reframed the hierarchy. You are now above the others, morally, emotionally, and once someone sees you that way, they defer to your influence without question. It's not about faking it, it's about timing it. A fringe historical example: in ancient Rome, generals returning from war held public triumphs, massive parades where they offered sacrifices to the gods dressed in white and spoke humble prayers. Behind them marched columns of chained prisoners and stolen gold. The message was clear: I conquer, but I do it righteously. It's emotional theater, and it works. Let's try it in everyday life. You want to make a bold ask at work? Begin with a generous offer. Help someone. Give credit publicly. Now, when you propose a controversial change, you've earned the benefit of the doubt. You've bathed your image in light. The shadow of your ambition disappears. Want a sneakier version? Say nothing, but let others speak for your goodness. Volunteer visibly once. Defend someone gently. Mention a selfless act, but never brag. People will do the myth building for you. And once you're the good one, you can move more freely than anyone else. But beware, this isn't a license for cruelty. Machiavelli doesn't endorse chaos, he endorses balance. So you must always ask, will this illusion serve the long game? Because once virtue becomes your mask, it also becomes your vulnerability. If people discover it's just for show, they don't see ambition, they see betrayal. Scholars still wrestle with this contradiction. Did Machiavelli believe in any moral truth, or was he a moral relativist, loyal only to effectiveness? Some argue he was a patriot, willing to compromise ethics to unify Italy. Others say he was bitter, writing from exile, burnt by the lies of noblemen who preached virtue and practiced vice. Either way, he left us with this warning. Men judge more by the eye than the hand. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. So tonight, ask yourself, where have I clung to virtue, even when it made me weak? Where could I use the appearance of goodness to earn a little more freedom, trust, or power? And if I were truly strategic, what moral performance would I give tomorrow, knowing the script might get me everything I need? Because in a world where perception guides loyalty, sometimes the halo is heavier than the crown. You're in the middle of a forest now, thick, tangled, almost silent. Only the occasional snap of a twig reminds you that something might be watching. You're not afraid, but you're not safe either. And that's exactly how it should be. Because in Machiavelli's world, if you're always predictable, you're always vulnerable. So tonight he hands you two animals, a lion with fangs that crush bone and a fox with eyes that never blink at traps. He tells you to be both, because power belongs to the creature that can adapt at will. Force when needed, deception when preferred. This isn't a metaphor. This is the Machiavellian duality. Let's start with the lion. The lion solves problems with presence. You walk into a room and you don't negotiate respect, you wear it. You make clear decisions, you draw hard boundaries, you don't flinch. This isn't aggression, it's clarity. It's saying, here's what I will accept, here's what I will not. It's enforcing your standards, not begging for them to be met. Lions are respected not because they roar, but because everyone knows what happens if they have to. A real-life lion move? Firing a toxic employee after one final violation, without apology. Telling a manipulative partner, this conversation ends unless we shift tone. Walking away from a negotiation when your baseline isn't honored. It's rare, but when it happens, it echoes. Now, let's bring in the fox. The fox doesn't dominate. It navigates. It reads the terrain, senses shifts in tone, hears the lie in someone's voice before they finish speaking. The fox doesn't correct. The fox remembers. It doesn't expose its knowledge. It uses it strategically. Being the fox means asking questions you already know the answers to. Letting someone finish lying so you learn what they're trying to hide. Pretending not to notice, not to care, until the time is right. Here's a historical gem. When Julius Caesar was kidnapped by pirates, he didn't beg or panic. He joked. He told them they were demanding too little ransom for someone of his importance. They laughed. They fed him well. Once he was freed, he raised a fleet, hunted them down, and crucified every last one. Fox, then lion. Machiavelli adored this blend. He wrote, "A prince must imitate both the fox and the lion, for the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves." One is not better than the other. You must know which to be, moment by moment. And this adaptability is where true influence lies. Let's bring this into your world. You're in a conflict. Someone challenges you, publicly. Lion mode might be to speak directly, assert authority, shut it down. But fox mode? You nod, let them speak. Then you ask a single question, quiet, surgical, that exposes the hole in their logic. They crumble. But no one saw you push. That's influence. Or maybe you're trying to win support. You could force it, loud, confident, insistent, or you could drip quiet praise into someone's ear. Build rapport. Let them think they chose you. Lion gets the crown, fox keeps it. A fringe biological tidbit for the night. In wolf packs, the alpha doesn't bark the loudest. He moves the least. The others adjust to him. His power comes from how calmly he carries it. That's both fox and lion in one coat. But here's the warning Machiavelli whispers. Most people get stuck in one role, too much lion, and you become a tyrant, resisted, feared, and eventually overthrown. Too much fox, and you become slippery, distrusted, isolated, and expendable. Scholars still debate which side Machiavelli leaned toward. Some argue he loved cunning above all else. Others say he respected raw authority when used swiftly and without hesitation. But all agree the survivor is the one who can switch, seamlessly. So how do you build this muscle? You start by asking, in every power interaction, is this a moment for strength or subtlety? Do I need to be respected or underestimated? Is the trap already set, or do I need to roar to remind them? And remember, you never show both animals at once. The lion roars in the open, the fox smiles in the dark, and no one should ever be certain which one you are. So tonight, as the forest fades and your eyes grow heavy, ask yourself, where have I been too soft, too quiet, when I needed to stand like a lion? And where have I been too blunt, too loud, when I could have slipped through like a fox? What would happen if, just once this week, I surprised everyone by becoming the other creature? Because power doesn't come from choosing one side. It comes from mastering the mask and knowing exactly when to change it. You're sitting across from someone now, someone you've trusted, or maybe just tolerated. You've shared stories, laughed, maybe even cried. But tonight Machiavelli leans in close and whispers, kindness is not always love, and some love is a cage. He's not talking about enemies this time. He's talking about the people who get close, too close. The ones who smile as they study you. The ones who offer gifts wrapped in invisible strings. Tonight, he teaches you how to spot it, and when the moment comes, how to respond with terrifying calm. Because this tactic isn't about domination. It's about disarming suspicion. It's about weaponized kindness. And if you want real influence, you'll need to use it and protect yourself from it. Let's begin with something subtle. You're in a tense situation. A colleague opposes you publicly. Instead of retaliating, you praise them. You've always had such strong convictions. I respect that, even if I disagree. Boom, you just made your enemy look reactive, emotional, you calm, generous, in control. Now others question them, not you. That's kindness as a knife, wrapped in silk, delivered with a smile. Machiavelli saw this all the time in Florence. Rivals would offer favors to build obligation. Noblemen would overpraise opponents to expose their insecurities. And when a politician grew too confident, a friend would remind him, "You've been so patient lately. I admire how you've kept quiet, despite everything they've said about you." Strategic, untraceable. A fringe tidbit, in Japanese swordsmanship, there's a concept called tsundome, the moment when a blade stops just short of cutting to demonstrate complete control. That's what strategic kindness is, a mercy that's clearly a choice, not a weakness. Let's bring this closer. Ever been in a relationship where someone repeatedly hurts you but apologizes just enough to keep you? That's manipulation disguised as humility. Ever been in a workplace where someone just wanted to help, but their help always puts you in their debt? That's control disguised as support. And ever tried to call it out only to look petty? Exactly, that's the trap. Because when people weaponize kindness, they kill you softly. They offer just enough warmth to keep you close, but never enough honesty to feel safe. So Machiavelli advises two things. Use this tactic when you must. Recognize it fast when others do it to you. Let's talk about the first. You've got someone you need to neutralize, but you can't confront them directly. Here's how you play it. Compliment their strengths publicly. Ask them for guidance on a topic they secretly know little about. Praise their restraint in moments they were clearly seething. Thank them for their patience after they've been passive-aggressive. Now they're off balance. They can't lash out without looking defensive. They can't challenge you without admitting weakness. And suddenly everyone's looking at you like the reasonable one. Congratulations. You didn't win the argument, you won the narrative. But let's not forget the second part. Protection. When someone is too helpful, ask, why now? When someone praises you out of nowhere, ask, what do they need from me? And when someone's apology feels rehearsed, don't just forgive, observe. Because here's the truth Machiavelli hated to say aloud. People don't always mean what they give, and sometimes the deepest betrayals begin with the softest gestures. One historical case? Brutus. He wasn't Caesar's enemy. He was his friend. He dined with him, fought beside him, and when the daggers came out, Caesar's last words weren't to his enemies, they were to Brutus. That's the danger of kindness with a motive. it gets close enough to reach your spine. And scholars still argue, was Machiavelli warning us or giving us permission? Some say he was scarred, burned by false alliances, exiled by friends who smiled too much. Others say he simply saw the game clearly. If you're not disarming people, they're disarming you. So tonight, as your thoughts slow and the world dims, ask yourself, where have I been softened by praise when I should have been sharpened by caution? Who in my life keeps giving, but never without a receipt? And where could I say something kind tomorrow, not to flatter, but to control the temperature of the room? Because in the Machiavellian world, the sharpest blade is often disguised as compassion. You walk into a silent room, no whispers, no footsteps, just silence. The kind of silence that follows something irreversible, the kind that feels like a door has closed behind you, quietly, completely. This is where loyalty ends. Tonight, Machiavelli teaches you the most uncomfortable truth in the entire game of influence. Sometimes, betrayal is not a failure of character, it's a strategy. Yes, you read that right, the calculated betrayal. Not betrayal born of spite or chaos, but betrayal done with timing, planning, and a painfully steady hand. Let's not pretend this isn't ugly, it is. But Machiavelli didn't write The Prince to help you win friends. He wrote it so you could survive a world where people will betray you unless you go first. Let's start with a story. You've aligned yourself with someone powerful, useful, maybe even loyal. But now, they're growing stronger, independent. They no longer need you. Worse, they've started to question your decisions, your pace, your judgment. In Machiavelli's world, that means one thing: they're rehearsing your downfall. So what do? You don't confront them, you don't warn them. You smile, nod, and begin your quiet retreat. You start removing their influence, limiting their access, whispering just enough doubt into the right ears. And then, at the moment when your position is strongest and theirs is weakest, you let the floor fall out. Not with drama, with finality. That's the Machiavellian betrayal. Not emotional, not chaotic, strategic, cold, complete. A famous historical example, Oliver Cromwell and King Charles I. Cromwell served Charles during the English Civil War, fought under his name, publicly pledged loyalty. But when the tide turned, Cromwell didn't hesitate. He tried the king, executed him, and restructured the nation in his own image. Scholars still argue, was Cromwell always planning it, or did he simply recognize the moment when loyalty no longer served his goals? Machiavelli wouldn't care. He would only ask, did it work? Now let's bring this to real life. Imagine a business partner who's no longer aligned. They resist change, question your vision, drain your energy. You've tried talking, rebuilding, compromising, but now it's clear they're a liability. You have two options. Keep dragging them forward. Out of guilt, out of nostalgia, end it, cleanly, strategically, without drama. Guess which one Machiavelli chooses? Of course, betrayal isn't always external. Sometimes it's internal. You may need to betray your old self to grow, your old beliefs, old loyalties, old dreams. That's not weakness, that's evolution. And sometimes, you must betray someone who loves you because their love is rooted in a version of you that no longer exists. Now let's be careful. This is where Machiavellian thinking gets dangerous. This tactic is not about becoming a sociopath. It's about asking, is this relationship still serving its purpose? Is this alliance still aligned? And if not, how do I exit with precision, not apology? Because half betrayals are messy. They leak, they rot, they ruin your reputation. A clean betrayal, though, it's almost poetic, like when a chess player sacrifices their queen, not in panic, but because it opens the path to victory. You don't slam the table, you just tip the piece and keep your eyes on the board. Let's dig into the psychology. Humans are wired for reciprocity. When someone helps us, we feel we owe them. This is powerful until it becomes a prison. Ever stay in a job too long because someone took a chance on you? Ever protect a mentor's bad decisions because they once guided you? Ever stay in a relationship out of history instead of happiness? Machiavelli says, gratitude is beautiful, but it should never be absolute. Because if loyalty becomes a leash, it's not virtue, it's surrender. So how do you betray the right way? Time it with logic, not emotion. Don't betray in anger. Do it with a clear head. Control the narrative. If possible, let others discover the split rather than announcing it. Burn no extra bridges. Make a clean cut. No lingering jabs, no bitter explanations. Be unavailable for guilt. Regret is a luxury for people who lose. A strange historical footnote, Machiavelli himself was betrayed by his own city. Imprisoned, tortured, exiled, and yet he still wrote The Prince as a gift, an attempt to re-enter political life by handing power back to those who turned on him. Was it loyalty or the greatest long con of all time? We'll never know. So tonight, as your breath slows and the walls soften into shadow, ask yourself, what am I still loyal to that no longer serves me? What alliances am I afraid to sever, even though they're silently severing me? And what would it look like to make one bold, clean betrayal? Not from malice, but from clarity. Because in a world built on shifting sand, sometimes the only way forward is through the knife. You're sitting in a chair now, not a throne, not a pedestal, just a plain, heavy chair in the middle of a quiet room, and yet everyone is looking at you, waiting, listening. Why? Because you've made yourself look like you have power. And in Machiavelli's world, that's more than enough. Tonight, you explore one of the strangest truths about influence. You don't need real power to act like you have it. And if you act like you have it long enough, people will believe it's real. This is the strategy of maintaining power, even if you fake it. Let's be clear, Machiavelli doesn't expect you to be born into a palace. He doesn't believe in divine right, royal blood, or fairy tale meritocracy. He believes in momentum, in optics, in confidence masquerading as legitimacy. And if you master the illusion of control, the world will hand you the real thing. Here's how it works. Power, real structural power, is rare, but perceived power, that's everywhere. When you enter a room and speak calmly, dress with intention, and offer zero unnecessary explanations, people fill in the gaps. They assume you're informed, respected, connected, even if you're none of those things yet. This isn't delusion, it's positional theater, and it's one of the oldest tactics in history. Let's look at one of Machiavelli's favorites, Francesco Sforza. Sforza started as a mercenary. No title, no land, no legacy. But he acted like a prince long before anyone called him one. He spoke like a ruler, dressed like a ruler, commanded like a ruler, and eventually he became the Duke of Milan. He manifested power by performing it, not spiritually, strategically, a fringe historical echo. In 1917, the Bolsheviks stormed the Winter Palace in Russia, not with massive armies, but with perceived authority. They leveraged image, flags, slogans, confident broadcasts, and within hours, the illusion of power became actual regime change. Modern psychology has a name for this, the authority heuristic. People are more likely to obey or believe someone who simply appears authoritative, even without credentials. The right posture, the right tone, the right framing, enough to override logic. Now let's apply this to your world. You're not feeling confident in a meeting. You're underqualified, outnumbered, unprepared. Here's what you do. Sit still, move less. Speak later in the conversation, not first. When you do speak, pause first, then talk slower than usual. Frame your statements as statements, not questions, even if internally you're unsure. Why? Because the slower you move, the more authority you project. Confidence is contagious, even when it's synthetic. Want something more advanced? Let's say you're launching something, a project, brand, pitch. You don't announce it like you're hoping for permission. You declare it like it's already underway. We've begun assembling the team. We're already seeing traction. The response has been better than we expected. Are those exaggerations? Maybe, but they build the narrative that makes success more likely, because people follow what feels inevitable. It's the principle behind political polling, viral content, even celebrity. Be seen as ascending, and people rush to lift the throne. Machiavelli would smirk at how often soft power gets mistaken for weakness. He knew the opposite is true. Soft power, the power of presence, mystery, and tone, is often stronger than law. He wrote, "Men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." In other words, reality doesn't matter until it catches up to your illusion. But there's a catch. Fake power becomes real only if you play the part consistently. Waver once, talk too much, apologize unnecessarily, seek validation too early, and the illusion crumbles. The room gets louder, people stop deferring, and your invisible crown falls off your head with a clunk. So you must maintain the role until the room recalibrates around your presence. Then you can become the person they already think you are. Let's try it now. Think of one area in your life where you feel disempowered. Now answer these. What would someone with total authority do here? How would they stand? What words would they never use? How would they react to doubt? Now imitate that. Not tomorrow, tonight. Because sometimes the shift doesn't begin with power, it begins with posture. And scholars still debate whether Machiavelli believed in moral power at all. Some say he thought all power was illusion. Others argue he wanted us to fake it until we earn it. Either way, he leaves us with this. If you control the frame, you don't need the facts. If you control the tone, you don't need the title. And if you carry yourself like the ruler, people will kneel simply because no one else dared first. So tonight, as you lie there in stillness, the air thick with quiet possibility, ask yourself, what would I do tomorrow if I were already in control? What conversation would change if I simply said less? What power might rise up to meet me if I stopped apologizing for taking up space? Because in the kingdom of influence, sometimes the only thing more powerful than real power is the kind everyone assumes you already have. You're sitting at a quiet table now, watching the world swirl around you. Voices, glances, tiny signals exchanged like currency. And in this moment, something clicks. You're not playing the game anymore. You're watching it. And everyone else still thinks you're a piece on the board. This is the Machiavellian mirror. And tonight, it turns inward because you've been wearing the masks. Now it's time to ask, who's underneath them? Influence changes you, slowly, subtly. What began as strategy, disarming charm, quiet cruelty, soft betrayals becomes second nature. And eventually, you don't know where the performance ends and the person begins. This is the danger no one talks about. Not the wrath of enemies, not the cost of deception, but the risk that over time you might become the mask that used to be optional. Let's go back for a moment. You learned to smile while holding a dagger. You mastered appearances. You chose fear over love when necessary. You manipulated gently, divided subtly, betrayed cleanly, and wore the illusion of power until it became your second skin. It worked. You got what you wanted, but what did you lose? Machiavelli never really answers that. He speaks to victory, not to wholeness. But you're human. And even in victory, you still wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes, wondering if anyone has ever really known the real you, or if you've forgotten them too. Let's bring in some psychology. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate society. But he warned, the danger is that we become identical with the mask, then the true self is lost. Machiavelli never read Jung, but he lived this tension. He spent his last years in exile. No court, no power, no audience, just his thoughts. He wrote letters saying he dressed in fine clothes alone in his study, pretending he was still advising kings. Performance without an audience, strategy without purpose. Who was he then? The fox, the lion, or just a man who forgot his own voice? And that's the crux tonight. Machiavellian strategy is effective. It works, but it leaves stains. And if you don't step back occasionally, look in the mirror and check who's still staring back, you'll wake up one day a stranger in your own skin. Let's make this personal. You've used charm, you've manipulated perception, you've held power over someone, maybe without even realizing it. You did what was necessary, but did you also cut off something essential? Your vulnerability, your softness, your ability to love without calculation? And worse, did someone try to see the real you and you scared them away with your silence? There's a quote often misattributed to Machiavelli: "Tread softly, for you tread on my dreams." But he would never say that, because in his world, dreams were distractions, softness was a liability. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe we need both. To wield the sword without losing the hand that once held flowers. To win without forgetting how it feels to need no strategy at all. Even scholars argue whether Machiavelli had a soul left by the end. Some say the prince was a satire, his attempt to hold a mirror to power's absurdity. Others think it was his confession, his legacy, his curse. You'll have to decide for yourself. So tonight, as the room darkens and your thoughts flicker like candlelight, ask the question no one else will. Who have I become while becoming influential? Which parts of me were tools and which were truths? And do I still remember what I looked like before I learned to win? Because the mirror doesn't lie, but it does wait. And one day when the games are over and the rooms fall silent, it will be the only face left watching you. The fire has burned low now, the masks are on the table, the room is quiet. Tonight there's no more plotting, no more maneuvers, just one final lesson echoing in the silence. Sweet lies before sleep. Because Machiavelli never promised you peace, he promised you power. And power, real power, is almost always a little bit lonely. But now that you've come this far, you understand why. To influence anyone, to rise, to protect your throne, be it in a palace, a boardroom, or a family dinner table, you've had to say the things people wanted to hear, even when they weren't true. You've whispered comfort into someone's panic. You've said, "I understand," when you didn't. You've offered reassurance when your mind was 5 steps ahead, planning your escape or your victory. And they believed you, because your lie was softer than the truth. Machiavelli doesn't call this cruelty, he calls it mercy. Because the world runs on lies. Not the evil kind, the necessary kind. Lies that smooth sharp edges, lies that buy you time, lies that make others feel safe so they don't ask too many questions. This isn't about deceit, it's about design. You're not corrupt, you're careful. You've learned that truth is a blade, and not everyone deserves the full weight of it. Take the tired friend who asks, "Am I doing okay?" You know they're struggling, that their decisions are wrecking their progress, but they need hope, not strategy. So you say, "You're doing better than you think." Sweet lie, right timing, influence, delivered like a lullaby. Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. He watched cities fall because someone insisted on telling hard truths at the wrong time. He saw peace crumble under honest speeches and noble ideals, and so he wrote a book not to inspire kings to be good, but to remind them, people don't follow the truth. They follow what comforts them, until it's too late. But here's where it turns inward again. The most dangerous lies aren't the ones we tell others. They're the ones we tell ourselves. They'll change. It's not that bad. I can stay quiet a little longer. One more compromise, then I'll stop. Machiavelli would raise an eyebrow, because every time you lie to yourself, you trade clarity for comfort, and comfort is the death of momentum. So here, at the edge of the night, you face the final paradox. To influence the world, you must sometimes lie to it, but to stay free, you must never lie to yourself. Know the difference, master the gap, and never confuse peacekeeping with self-erasure. And now, as the room goes dim and the last ember fades, ask yourself, what lies have I told today? Out of love, out of fear, out of strategy? Did they work? Did they protect something that matters? And tomorrow, will I have the strength to whisper a different truth when the timing is finally right? Because in the end, influence is not about domination, it's about direction. And the most powerful direction is the one no one sees you choose. Now let's wind down. So here we are. You've walked through the shadows of strategy, past the walls of fear and into the mirror of your own mind. And now, you rest, not as a puppet or a pawn, but as the quiet observer who has seen the game for what it truly is. Let your breath slow. Let your heartbeat match the stillness around you. You don't need to hold it all right now. The masks are on the table. The script is in the drawer. You've seen what influence costs. You've counted the tools. You've weighed the weapons. And even if you carry them again tomorrow, tonight, you can put them down. Close your eyes and let the old identities blur. The fox, the lion, the mirror, the throne, they'll be there when you wake. But for now, you're just someone who dared to learn the rules behind the smiles. Someone who knows how to nod and navigate. Someone who understands that power and peace rarely share a bed, but maybe, just maybe, they take turns watching the door. Breathe in, breathe out. You've done enough. No one's watching now, and you don't need to perform. You've mastered the art of influence, and tomorrow the world will follow your lead. But tonight, let go. You are safe, you are still, you are unseen, and finally, you are alone with your truth.